Hey, good afternoon. To my right, for those people who have been on a different planet for a while, to my right is Secretary Melissa DeRosa. To my left, Alfonso David, counsel to the governor. To his left, Budget Director Robert Mejica. They are all significantly sleep deprived, so please don't take advantage of them. I'm sleep deprived, but I'm actually less sensitive when I'm sleep deprived. We want to give you a quick update on the budget before you take off for the weekend. For me, again, the budget is in a broader context. I know a lot of talk about the budget on individual items, but just remember the landscape that we're dealing with. We have a $2.3 billion deficit, a shortfall in revenue, which I believe is attributable to the federal tax reform, which I believe is taking a toll on New York. I'm worried about the economic trajectory of the state. I spent yesterday with Mr. Kudlow at a follow-up meeting with President Trump about SALT and the effect on SALT and the unfairness of SALT, and the great irony to say you want to help build an economy in this country, but you have a tax reform plan that hurts New York State, California, two of the largest economic engines. I'm worried about the precedent of Amazon, what it says to businesses who would come to New York. So that's the context for what we're dealing in. I've stated clearly from the beginning what the priorities were in this budget. I've said them over and over and over again, and they haven't changed. First priority, directly linked to the context, is the fiscal integrity of the budget. It's math. The numbers have to add up. I know everybody wants to spend everything, so do I, but there's still an economic reality and the fiscal integrity of the budget. The permanent property tax cap, because that is directly related to SALT and the instability of New York citizens and taxpayers and homeowners. That was a top priority, still is a top priority. Congestion pricing, MTA reform. We tend to focus more on the congestion pricing part. The MTA reform is actually just as important. Reorganization of the MTA, changing the rules about board members and holdovers on the board, changing the contracting procedures of the MTA to use design build, allowing and mandating that the MTA debar bad contractors, a full audit of the MTA, a review of the East Side Access project, which is the project that began before many of the people in this room were born and is still going on, and bringing in a different team to review that, the way we did with the L train, doing away with the secret pocket veto of the capital plan. Criminal justice reform, where we have made some progress, but there is more to do. Speedy trial discovery, cash bail, and working through cash bail primarily on the different classifications, and public finance, campaign finance reform, and getting that done. Those have always been the priorities, and they still are the priorities, and I won't do a budget without those priorities. As I said, I want to get a budget done on time, but it's more important to have a budget that is right. We have never passed a bad budget. We've never passed a budget that turned out to be wrong. I've never come back and did what's called a mid-year correction, which is what you have to do when the budget doesn't work. You have to come back mid-year and readjust all the numbers. And that creates great instability to all the institutions in the state that were depending on that budget, school districts, hospitals, et cetera. And where we are now in the state, that's the last thing that I want to see happen. On a number of items, we have made progress, and I'm excited about it. The plastic bag ban is something I've been trying to get. I think that's going to make a significant difference. The way that works, there's been a number of explanations out there of people who don't have all the facts. It's a 5-cent paper fee if the local government opts in. Of the 5 cents, 3 cents goes to the State Environmental Protection Fund. 2 cents stays with the local government if they will run a reusable distribution bag program locally. If they won't, that 2 cents goes to the state also to run a reusable bag program in that area. In terms of the numbers and the fiscal integrity of the budget, I feel good about that. The numbers are very close to the proposed budget. Education aid is up about $50 million. We also have on the education aid prioritization of poorer schools in school districts, which was a priority for me. You know, all these groups, everybody does a press conference, we have to get more money for poor schools. Yeah, well then why hasn't the state ever said local school districts should prioritize poor schools? This year we will. There'll be a transparency addition, so we'll know exactly where the funding is going. Voting reforms, we did many. In this budget, we're going to do the reconciliation of the same time for the upstate polls to open as downstate. I never understood why upstate had a different, shorter period of time to vote than downstate New York. We also have on voting reforms, early voting we talked about, and a state holiday where that I think is going to be the most aggressive holiday of any state, 3 hours paid vacation from a public or private employer, so people can actually go out and vote. We'll close more prisons. I've closed 24 prisons, more prisons than any administration in the history of the state of New York, and I'm proud of that. We'll close up to 3 prisons, depending on the number of beds we need. But that's another symbol of the reformation of the criminal justice system. Why can you close prisons? Because you have more alternatives to incarceration. You're locking up fewer people, which is a good thing. I understand the rationale in upstate New York. They don't like to see a prison closed because it means jobs and economic development. But I'm not going to rationalize locking up people as an economic development tool. Women's issues, we've made progress. IVF coverage, egg freezing coverage, statewide maternal mortality review board, rape shield protections. We are working on a substitute for the pied-à-terre tax that we are still working on, which would basically be a real estate transfer tax on high-end properties, residential and commercial. We're working through that. Internet sales tax for counties is an open issue. Marijuana is the biggest single issue. When you go back and look at the 100 days agenda that we did, literally before January, I listed the 100 days agenda. Probably the biggest single issue that will not be addressed is the legalization of marijuana. That is, in concept, we have agreement, but that is all about the devil is in the details. And that is going to take more time to work out, but we talked about that several weeks ago. The legislature signaled that they didn't think it would be ready for the budget. I then substituted the revenue that went in congestion pricing for marijuana to the pied-à-terre tax at that time. So that's not really a surprise. But if you ask what is not going to get done, what's going to be carried over, the main thing is probably going to be marijuana legalization. That's, if I did it all.
The Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act. Why don't you do the Affordable Care Act?
We're codifying the protections of the Affordable Care Act into state law. As you all remember, we did the health exchange by executive order in 2011 because the Republican Senate refused to do it. So the governor did it by executive order, and then there are a number of protections provided by the Affordable Care Act on things like pre-existing conditions that are still continue to be under threat. As recently as earlier this week, President Trump asked the courts to take another look at it. It's clear that their war on health care is far from over. So the governor and the legislature have come to an agreement to codify much of the Affordable Care Act and the health exchange into law.
The president, as only the president can, he wants to end Obamacare, but he doesn't know what he would replace it with. Anyway,
Governor,
let's take some questions. Yeah.
you mentioned the transfer tax would apply to high-end properties. What value would a high-end property have? Is it residential or commercial?
Both, and that's what we're working through now, Jimmy. I don't have an answer for you. It's
Commercial properties?
That's one of the options is residential and commercial properties, yes. That are being considered. It's an option being considered.
What is the holdup, would you say, on congestion pricing? It seemed like on Monday, legislators had sort of committed to get there. I'm just curious what the details are that are sort of been more difficult to lock down.
First of all, it is a very big reform, right? When you think about, someone asked me what are the biggest things that we would have accomplished. I would say marriage equality on social policy, $15 minimum wage on economic policy. Congestion pricing will be the biggest thing we did on transportation, urban policy. Mayor Michael Bloomberg tried to get it over 10 years ago. It's a big deal politically. It's a big deal logistically. And the Speaker Carl Heastie's been working very hard in his conference. I believe conceptually we have agreement, but now you have to go through the details. And as I said, it's not just the congestion pricing, it's also the MTA reform issues. Because I said I would not support more funding for the MTA unless I felt comfortable that we had a better MTA, more efficient, more effective. So the devil is all in the details, right? And that's what we still are working through.
What about public campaign finance reform? Is that going to happen, or is there still resistance in the Assembly?
Public campaign finance reform is a priority for me in this budget. I would be very disappointed if we didn't get it in this budget. I don't see any reason why we can't. We've talked about it for a long period of time. Everyone says they support it. Well, then let's do it. Now, it is complicated to enact the rules and regulations. Fine, but let's figure out how to do it, and I see no reason why we can't do that in this budget.
Governor, will you issue an ultimatum, maybe no message of necessity unless it's included, or are you not at that point?
Look, I'm at the point I've said I'm not going to doing the right budget is more important than doing it on time, and these are the elements that I believe have to be in a right budget, and I believe public financing has to be in the budget. And I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be in the budget, right? If everybody says, I support it, I support it, I support it, good, then let's get it done. I do understand the logistical problem of there's a lot of questions here. It's not just one city, it would be statewide, it'd be legislative races, statewide races. What is the match? Who qualifies? Is it the same amount in New York City versus Albany versus Buffalo? How many races will you run? How many lines? I get it. But we can come up with a way to figure that out.
On the issue of limousine safety and limousine insurance, what provisions will be in the budget on that today?
Do you know the?
We do. We're still in the process of finalizing the proposal, but we anticipate that there will be increased criminal penalties for those that knowingly violate the law and operate limousines or buses that are out of service or labeled to be out of service. There will be increased civil penalties as well, and there will be additional requirements that anyone who is operating a commercial vehicle has to register and go through testing.
Just 1 second. The mayoral control for the New York City Department of Education will be renewed. The legislature has added a number of conditions that are new, more parental involvement, more community involvement. But I think it makes the system better, and everyone has agreed to it.
You've spoken repeatedly about the need to protect immigrants and the vital role they play in our state. Could you explain the rationale for eliminating the legal aid for them, the Liberty Defense Project, or whether that's been restored at this stage?
The Liberty Defense Project will continue. The governor has committed to making sure that that project continues at the Department of State. And for those who may not know, it provides legal services to immigrants. We anticipate we will be fully supporting that program throughout the year.
How much money is attached to that?
$50 million had been what they'd gotten previously.
No, that's not accurate. We have actually invested $10 million every year, and so we will be continuing to support the program.
Governor, on cash bail, both sources in the Assembly and the Senate say basically there's a framework for a deal whereby misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies would not be subject to cash bail, but more violent felonies would be subject to some sort of cash bail. Can you comment on that or confirm
There is
it?
a framework, yes. The details have to be completed. The place there is no agreement right now is on violent felonies. And the majority of the people affected are the misdemeanors and the nonviolent felonies. And that needs to be completed, but there's conceptual agreement there. There is conceptual disagreement on violent felonies and how to handle that. And that's where we are now stuck, I would say.
Is the disagreement about whether it would be cash bail or some other sort of mechanism to
If
hold
it's
those
not
people?
cash bail, then what would the circumstances be for remand? Would the person be entitled to a hearing, et cetera? That is the point of contention within different factions in the legislature.
But you anticipate that there will be some sort of deal to allow, say, the 75 to 85% of incarcerated people?
At this point, I would. The details are not there, Jesse, but if I had to guess, I would guess yes.
The property tax cap, legislative leaders indicated that they think it'll be in there to make it permanent. Do you feel like it's going to be in there? And also, there was some talk about some minor exemptions to it. Have you agreed?
Well, let me make it simple, Joe. If it's not there, there is no there.
They're going to put it in?
Then there is no there, if it's not there.
Have they said it's in?
It will be in, or nothing will be in. There will be no budget without a permanent property tax cap.
Why should motorcycles be exempted from congestion pricing?
Why should motorcycles? Because I ride a motorcycle. That would be a reason. I don't know. Does anybody know? Are they exempted from congestion pricing?
It's in one of, it was in a version of the bill. Most other jurisdictions that have allow for motorcycles and mopeds to be exempted. They're on most lanes. The federal government actually requires them to be on HOV lanes. They don't contribute to congestion. They actually reduce congestion. So for those reasons.
I think it's because Robert Mejica rides a motorcycle. I never heard of the exemption, just to be clear.
What's the status of the proposed healthcare cuts that were in the 30-day amendments?
The healthcare has been restored, right? All the healthcare has been restored.
Governor, a figure for lawmakers is tied to a timely budget. If all the budget bills aren't printed tonight, are you willing to issue messages of necessities?
We don't even have an agreement. So timing isn't the issue. We don't have an agreement.
A number on the increase in school aid and just.
About 50 million,
50?
above our proposed.
So do you think is that like a little over 3%, which is what ranking filers are saying they're hearing?
Do you know the numbers?
The governor's budget proposal was about 3.6%. This is going to be it'll be about 3.7% when we're done.
We were 3.6 in the proposed. This is 50 million more. Anything else any mistakes I made? Tell them now. I do not fear embarrassment. Thanks, guys.